Horror readings by Danielson. The Birthday Bicycle by Oldman1960.
This happened to me when I was a young boy, and I am now in my late 50s, and I haven't thought about being 10 years old in a long time. My youngest kid told me about this website a while back, and I thought you all might like to hear this story of someone I would never want to meet again. I remember it being around my 10th birthday when everything changed in my life for my family. I remember it being the best birthday yet because my mom had secretly saved up enough money to buy me my own bicycle, and I was more than thrilled. No more borrowing my older brother's when he let me, or standing on the back or sitting on the handlebars of a friend's bike. We were by no means well off when I was young. We didn't have much, so getting that bike had meant a lot to me. My father was a man who worked a lot and drank even more than he worked. I am pretty sure he was drunk more than he was ever sober, and because of that, he was hardly around. That was okay with me, my siblings and my mother for the most part. Things were actually nice and peaceful when he was not home, and the nights he actually did come home, we knew right away to steer clear of him, be quiet, and leave him alone. We lived outside of a small town, down a long dirt road with not very many neighbors nearby. The closest one was a good mile down from us, a really big farmhouse with a lot of fields around them. I remember being friends with their kids as they were around the same age as us, and we went to school together. Their mom was very sweet and always offered us something to eat or drink when we would stop down there. And their dad, well, he was the complete opposite of my father. I never saw him drink, yell, or slap them or their mom around. We knew that not every family was like ours, and that some fathers out there actually did seem to care for their families. Like I said, I remember it being around my 10th birthday because my mom had baked a big cake for myself, my brother, and my 2 younger sisters to share, and of course she had some too. Then she took me out back, where she had hidden the bike from me in one of the sheds, and I remember screaming with excitement, hugging and kissing her, telling her I loved her and that she was the greatest mom ever. I hopped on it right away and took off up and down the road to test it out. It was a great feeling in that moment. When something so great happens, you kind of forget the regular hell life you seem to live every other day. It's hard to explain, I guess. Things were good the next couple of days. My father had not really been home for almost a week, probably at that point. Sometimes he would just stop in for a few moments here or there. I guess just to check up to make sure my mom hadn't left him or anything. When I was that age, I hardly recall at any point in time when he was home for more than 1 or 2 nights a week, and never 2 nights in a row. We, the kids, never knew what he was doing, nor did we ever really want to know. We just knew it was better at home when he wasn't there. I remember riding my bike down the dirt road on my way home from running to town to pick up something at the grocery store for my mom, when my dad's pickup truck passed me and kept heading on down toward home. It made me not even want to go back home, but really, what else could I do? The sun was just starting to go down, and normally if he did come home, it was right after work, or very late at night after he left who knows where. So it was kind of odd he was on his way home at this time of the day. By the time I pulled up into the yard, I could already hear the yelling. I could hear my mom's voice, trying to reason with him for something or other, and then I would hear my dad's voice just overpower hers. I heard something smash. I didn't want to go inside. I could hear my little sisters bawling, and then I heard my mom crying too. My older brother just happened to be down at the neighbor's place that had the farmhouse. I really didn't want to go inside my own house at this point. I heard another smash. I decided to go in because I couldn't leave my mom and sisters in there alone with him. I peeked in the window of the door before I actually walked in and saw the house getting destroyed right in front of my family by my crazy, drunken father. I tried opening the door slightly and getting my sister's attention to come out, but my dad had seen and went from focusing on them to me. I blocked a lot of this out, but from what I can remember, he turned and went straight for me and picked me up by my shoulders and started screaming in my face. My mom was behind him, begging him to put me down, but he just turned and gave her another slap in the face, and she backed down. From what I could tell that was coming out of him, he was livid when he saw me riding down the road on a bike he knew wasn't my brother's. When he got home, he confronted my mom on where it came from and how I was on it. He got out of her that she had secretly been stashing away money to save up to get me the bike, and my dad lost it when she told him that. I'm sure he was probably on a 5 or 6 day heavy drinking binge at this point, because I remember the smell of his breath was like sour whiskey pouring into my nostrils as he screamed at me. He was sure that my mother was hiding other things from him, and he was going to find out what. That was why he started tearing up the house. In the 5 minutes it took him from passing me on the road until I got there, he had done quite a bit. All the furniture was thrown around. Lamps and pictures had been smashed. He threw me against one of the walls, and I looked up at him from the floor. He had stormed into the kitchen and smashed what was left of my birthday cake against the back door. Both my sisters were huddled in a corner, holding each other, while my mom cried and had blood running down her face. That was it for me. This was the worst I had ever seen my father, and I was scared. I ran out of the house, hopped on my bike, and started heading towards the neighbors. We did not have a telephone at the time, but I knew they did, and I was going to call the police in town and stop him. I hardly got out of the driveway when I heard the front door open and heard my father yelling at me to get my ass back in there. I just kept pedaling, thinking I needed to get to the neighbors and everything would be better. That's when I heard his truck start up, and I looked behind me, and he was backing out of the driveway and starting to head towards me. I could see the neighbor's house in the distance, and I just kept on pedaling until I started to see the headlights getting closer and closer. I looked behind me, and he was so close that I knew he was going to hit me. I remember I just jumped up off the bike towards the side of the road and tumbled down into the side of the field. I shot up and just started running across the fields towards the neighbors, hearing my dad yelling, but oddly not really caring. When I looked behind me, I saw that my father had already turned around and was heading back to our house. I got to the neighbors a few minutes later and pounded on their door. Their mom opened the door and took a step back because at this point I was sobbing, shaking, and probably didn't look like my normal self. She took me inside and called to her husband to get in there. I was in the middle of telling them what happened when my brother and his friend walked in from playing out back, and in about 2 seconds, he was out of the door, heading towards home. The mom called the police in town, and they said they would send someone out right away. About 10 minutes passed, and no police had shown up, so I begged their dad to please drive me down to my house. I didn't know what was happening, and I was scared. Fortunately, he agreed, and he knew my little sisters and mom were there. About halfway down the road, we passed my bike. It was completely mangled up. My dad had run over it with his truck. I started crying again, partly because I loved that bike, and mostly because I could have still been on it when he did that. We got to the house, and my father's truck was gone. Apparently, my brother ran all the way home, picked up a baseball bat that was on the side of the house, and with no hesitation, walked into the living room and smashed my dad's kneecap in. As he laid there screaming, my brother grabbed my sisters and my mother and ran into one of the bedrooms. He managed to crawl out to his truck and drive away. The cops showed up just a few minutes after the neighbor and I arrived and took a look at everything that had happened. They found my father about an hour later, one town over at the local tavern. They said it wasn't very hard to find him, since he was a well-known drunk in the area, and the bars were the first places they were going to look for him. They arrested him pretty much on the spot. That night, after the police found my father, the neighbors invited us to stay with them for however long we needed to. My mom was embarrassed, but so very thankful for their help. We only stayed a couple of days, enough time for my mom to make arrangements to leave the town and to go live with my aunt, her sister, for a while, and a couple 100 miles away from where we lived. I never did see my father again after that, and I have never really minded that. I know he wasn't in jail too long, because shortly after we got settled in at my aunt's, we began to receive calls and letters started. But my mom never caved and went back. My God, who would? After a year or so, my dad gave up and agreed to a divorce. I never really paid much attention to that, as I was still young and was still living in a different life than I had before. We stayed at my aunt's for a couple of years, until my mom saved up enough money after getting a job to get our own place. At that point, my brother was 16 or 17, so he was also helping bring in money from his job, as well as myself with a newspaper route. I even saved up enough money to get myself another bike. Life was now better than it had ever been. Thanks for letting me share.